Trump touched down in Beijing today carrying a set of dilemmas unlike any previous American president has encountered at a summit with China. First, an ongoing military blockade at the Strait of Hormuz, the critical channel through which 20% of the world's oil flows, has pushed energy prices higher for every household in the United States and steadily weakened global economic stability with each passing week. Second, the imposition of 145% tariffs on China has driven up costs for the average American family by roughly $900 per year, marking the largest U.S. tax increase relative to GDP since 1993. At the same time, China retaliated with 125% counter tariffs, slashing U.S. agricultural exports, hitting American farmers hard, and reducing total merchandise trade between the U.S. and China by over a third since Trump's initial visit to Beijing in 2017. Third, the national debt has reached $39 trillion and continues to climb at a rate of $532 every second, rendering economic shocks and market turbulence extraordinarily costly precisely as the war in Iran adds pressure through defense expenditures, energy spikes, and fiscal strain simultaneously. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping approaches the summit with China's economy expanding at 5% in 2025, surpassing forecasts. Chinese exporters have successfully shifted to markets outside the U.S. In April, Chinese exports surged 14.1% year-on-year to $359.4 billion. Restrictions on rare earth exports have already exposed American dependence on Chinese supply chains for defense and technology manufacturing. Additionally, a legal injunction preserves roughly $100 billion in annual Iranian oil trade from U.S. sanctions, an effort reportedly enforced by Trump's own Treasury Secretary. Analysts have noted plainly that Xi has achieved a long-held objective: to be treated as an equal on the world stage. Trump's mere presence in Beijing, in this context, symbolizes a concession that no negotiation spin can entirely obscure. The financial stakes are immense and extend far beyond any headline deal. Executives joined Trump on this trip to underscore the tangible economic consequences. Tim Cook, flying along, represents Apple, which generates approximately $70 billion annually from China and relies heavily on Chinese manufacturing. Any strain in trade relations directly threatens iPhone prices for American consumers, disrupts the company's supply chain, and exerts downward pressure on Apple's stock, a significant component of the S&P 500 and therefore retirement portfolios across the country. Elon Musk also traveled with Trump, highlighting the importance of Tesla's Shanghai Gigafactory, which produces hundreds of thousands of vehicles annually and depends on both Chinese government cooperation and continued market access. Any negative shift in U.S. China trade arrangements jeopardizes Tesla's operational stability and market valuation, with ripple effects felt in millions of retirement accounts holding the stock either directly or through index funds. In an unexpected stopover in Alaska, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA joined the delegation, sending a strong signal about the summit's critical semiconductor issues. China seeks advanced chips for its AI expansion, yet NVIDIA's H20 chips, designed to comply with U.S. export regulations, were still restricted in April 2026. Chinese demand represents billions in potential revenue that current policy blocks. The summit's decisions on export controls will influence NVIDIA's stock price, which in turn affects trillions in household wealth held through technology-focused ETFs and index funds. Trump's objectives in Beijing are clear and urgent. He needs China to exert pressure on Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He requires a tariff rollback substantial enough to claim a political victory ahead of challenging midterm elections. He also aims to secure tangible Chinese purchases of U.S. agricultural commodities, Boeing aircraft, and energy products, which would serve as measurable evidence of economic progress. China, however, is not desperate. Its exports surged 14.1% in April to $359.4 billion, proving that Chinese manufacturers have effectively redirected sales away from the American market. In the same month, the trade surplus with the U.S. expanded by 13%. Beijing holds multiple layers of leverage, and its demands are precise and formidable. Beijing is pressing Washington to explicitly oppose Taiwan independence, a stance far stronger than the current U.S. language of non-support. It seeks to block, or at least delay, the $14 billion arms package to Taiwan, awaiting Trump's signature. It also wants a rollback of semiconductor export restrictions, specifically granting Chinese firms access to advanced chips vital for AI development. Additionally, China expects U.S. authorities to remove Chinese companies from sanction lists, particularly those linked to Iranian oil deals. Analysts suggest that realistically achievable outcomes include extending the trade truce agreed in South Korea in October, renewing Chinese purchases of soybeans, and confirming Boeing aircraft orders. These transactional moves provide visible headlines, but do not resolve the deeper structural disputes. A $30 billion tariff reduction per side on selected product categories, avoiding sensitive strategic technology and national security items, is reportedly the framework under negotiation. This deal would be meaningful for certain sectors of American industry, but falls short of addressing long-term structural tensions. Gregory Poling of the Center for Strategic and International Studies has stated plainly that while both nations want the Strait of Hormuz reopened, the diplomatic and strategic burden of the blockade weighs far heavier on Washington. China's energy imports are disrupted, yet the United States faces the bulk of political and economic costs, actively managing the military operation while bearing global diplomatic repercussions. This asymmetry defines the financial stakes of the summit. The side with more leverage usually extracts greater concessions. U.S. officials have acknowledged privately that Xi Jinping holds the stronger hand entering the negotiations. Trump and Xi exchanged handshakes outside Beijing's Great Hall of the People, accompanied by a morning display of brass bands, military units, and children waving both American and Chinese flags. Once the cameras left, serious discussions commenced. The ceremonial optics were meant to convey stability, but the substance of the closed-door negotiations will determine whether stock portfolios, energy bills, mortgage rates, and consumer prices rise or fall over the next 12 months. The first critical financial issue is rare earths, arguably the most structurally significant topic of the summit, with immediate implications for American defense capabilities, technology supply chains, and the valuation of companies present in nearly every U.S. retirement account. China controls roughly 90% of global rare earth refining. Elements such as neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium, and terbium are indispensable inputs for semiconductor chips, electric vehicle motors, F-35 fighter jets, guided missile systems, wind turbines, MRI machines, and almost all advanced technologies produced worldwide. When China suspended rare earth exports in April and October of 2025, it created not only supply chain disruptions, but also a stark demonstration of the structural dependency of American defense manufacturing and technology production on a geopolitical rival's export policy. Trump acquiesced both times rather than escalate the confrontation. Tom Marino of Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy emphasized that replenishing depleted U.S. munition stockpiles due to the Iran war depends on these heavy rare earths, where China maintains a near monopoly. During an active military campaign, that dependency represents the single most powerful bargaining chip in Xi's hand. The trade truce established in South Korea last October included China agreeing to pause rare earth export restrictions. That agreement expires this fall, making its renewal, extension, or lapse the highest stakes financial decision emerging from this summit. Should rare earth flows continue, American defense production remains uninterrupted, technology supply chains stabilize, and manufacturers can plan confidently. Should they be disrupted again, every U.S. company producing electric vehicles, semiconductors, defense systems, and consumer electronics will face supply chain stress, leading to higher costs, lower profits, and declining stock prices. Jensen Huang traveled to Beijing specifically because NVIDIA's business model relies entirely on semiconductor inputs, including rare earth materials, and access to a Chinese market representing its largest growth opportunity. The second major outcome is the tariff deal. Negotiations reportedly revolve around a $30 billion reduction per side, confined to specific goods categories, while excluding sensitive strategic technology and national security items. For some American industries, this would offer tangible relief, yet it does not resolve underlying structural tensions. Analysts emphasize that headline numbers, renewed soybean purchases, and Boeing orders provide visible metrics of progress, but do not alter the deeper economic asymmetries. Meanwhile, China continues to leverage its export control and supply chain dominance, signaling the limits of what Washington can realistically achieve. The current discussions center on a realistic outcome of a $30 billion reduction per side, applied to selected categories of goods, while excluding strategic technologies and national security items. For American households, this carries immediate significance. The 145% tariff regime has added roughly $1,500 per household annually in higher costs, representing the most visible economic toll of the trade war. Any substantial rollback of tariffs passes directly to the cost of electronics, clothing, furniture, appliances, and everyday consumer goods. Politically, the calculus is uneven. Trump faces pressure to deliver tangible victories before the midterm elections, and renewed Chinese purchases of soybeans are the clearest measure. American farmers, whose exports to China were directly hurt by the tariff battle, hold political sway. Boeing aircraft orders are another highly visible metric. Hundreds of billions in potential contracts can be accelerated or delayed, depending entirely on diplomatic circumstances. These purchases generate headlines, create jobs in specific states, and provide exactly the optics of success that Trump's negotiating style demands, even if they do not resolve deeper structural conflicts. Cornell economics professor Eswar Prasad stated publicly that the world is watching, hoping the two leaders can settle at least some issues while preventing further escalation on unresolved matters. The third outcome carries the most immediate market consequences: Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. The ceasefire in the Iran war is widely described as hanging by a thread. The Strait of Hormuz blockade, through which 20% of global oil transits, remains in effect. Oil prices are elevated, meaning every American household pays more at the pump. Businesses face higher shipping and production costs, and the Federal Reserve, already constrained between 3.3% inflation and $39 trillion in national debt, cannot aggressively cut rates because energy-driven inflation maintains pressure. Both the U.S. and China benefit from reopening the strait, given that Beijing imports large quantities of Gulf oil. Yet the diplomatic and strategic burden falls much more heavily on Washington. The Center for Strategic and International Studies notes that Trump is confronting an increasingly unpopular war with spiraling global consequences just ahead of the midterms. Xi Jinping does not face the same domestic pressure. This imbalance means that any meaningful progress on Iran will require her to expend diplomatic capital with Tehran in exchange for concrete concessions from the United States on matters Beijing cares deeply about: Taiwan policy, arms sales, and semiconductor export rules. Senior Taiwanese officials have voiced their concerns publicly, warning that placing Taiwan on the negotiation table would be highly risky. Even minor softening of the U.S. stance on Taiwan independence, linguistic or formal, in exchange for Chinese leverage on Iran could have significant and lasting consequences for regional stability and global financial markets. A senior official in Taipei told Bloomberg directly that Taiwan is closely monitoring whether it will be traded away during these talks. For Americans, the most likely summit outcome maps to a limited stabilization scenario. The tariff truce is extended, soybean and Boeing purchases are renewed, and rare earth flows continue uninterrupted. Discussions on Iran occur without breakthroughs, and language on Taiwan remains deliberately ambiguous. This scenario is modestly positive for markets. Not a euphoric deal, but it reduces extreme tail risks. S&P 500 futures already reflect partial optimism. If the summit meets or slightly exceeds these expectations, equities may hold steady or tick upward. Energy prices could ease slightly with hope of progress in Hormuz, and consumer confidence stabilizes. Conversely, a disappointing summit could trigger sharp market reactions. Should rare earth restrictions resume, Taiwan become a flashpoint, or Iran negotiations collapse publicly, the impact would be swift and significant. The one-year trade truce expiring this fall without renewal would return every American household to full tariff exposure by autumn. The China-related risk embedded in every American 401k, S&P 500 index fund, and energy bill is active right now, being negotiated behind closed doors in Beijing. The decisions made today by the world's two largest economies will hit personal finances before the weekend concludes. Stay informed, track developments closely, and understand how each move shapes your savings, investments, and household expenses. The outcome of this summit is not abstract. It will land directly in your wallet. The choices made behind these doors define what you pay, what you earn, and how secure your retirement accounts remain. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.